This is Brian Johnson. He's a possibly autistic retired tech CEO who recently sold his company for over $800 million and is now putting all of his money and time into becoming immortal.
Brian Johnson is determined to live forever or die trying.
But decided that the only way he was going to live forever was if he gave up his free will to an algorithm and regularly consumed the blood of the young and poor, including the blood of his own teenage son, but like in a cute, wholesome way though. You'll see. Now, Brian's actually been on the internet documenting his journey for eternal youth for years now, but just recently had a Netflix documentary made about him. So I watched it along with a bunch of his other content, and I figured it'd be fun to go over what I discovered. Now, Brian wasn't making much headway on his vampire journey until he met this man, Dr. Oliver Zolman. Zolman? I don't remember. Who's Brian's longevity consultant.
When Brian first reached out, he seemed a bit lost, so I showed him my longevity level 1, 2, 3 protocol.
Also, did you guys know that a longevity consultant was a thing? I'm trying to figure out if I'm just poor or is that not common knowledge? Anyway, Dr. Zolman's philosophy is that for Brian to reach Dorian Gray mode, you have to look at each internal organ, figure out what it needs, like the minerals and nutrients and all that health shit, and give it that every single day so that the organs never regress.
It's probably over 100 different things I do any given day that the body has asked for to be in its ideal state.
Okay, so what are these 100 things that Brian's doing every day? Are we talking about doing your push-ups and eating broccoli, or are you busting out the pentagrams and sacrificing African children to the sun god? In short, I would say it's mostly the first one, but things do get really fucked up. Anyway, what are those 100 things that he's doing every single day? He wakes up every day at 4:30 a.m., no alarms needed. Next, he turns on his 4K UV light to replicate the sun because he wakes up before the sun because the sun is pussy and not immortal. While he's in front of the fake sun, he takes his temperature with his ear device. Then he goes downstairs and takes 54 pills for nutrients. Puts on this infrared hat that's supposed to stop balding. After that, he works out for an hour, eats a tray of vegetables, does more weird infrared shit. Then he eats another tray of vegetables, this time with a side of sludge. And although this sludge does remind me of the purple goo from that one Power Rangers movie, I have to be honest, I heard it's really good.
That's really good.
Takes 34 more pills for more nutrients, miscellaneous, and then he does his nighttime skincare routine. Now, I would assume for all of us watching, this sounds fucking horrible, but is it effective?
After doing Blueprint now for 2 years, I've reversed my biological age 5.1 years, and my speed of aging is 0.69, which means for every 12 months, I age 8 months.
Call him crazy, but it sounds like he's fucking doing it. This man reversed 5 years off of his age and he's only 2 years in. We have to give credit where credit is due. As long as this isn't another Sam Bankman-Fried situation, this is a win. I mean, I did go to his website and the first thing I see is like a blueprint stack that costs $350. So like, I'm feeling a little uneasy if this is a scam or not. But what's making me feel a little more confident is the fact that this man Brian is willing to put all of his data out there. Because not only has Brian been doing a bunch of insane shit, but he's actually been recording every single statistic he can and putting it out publicly on his website.
What if we published all of his biometric data online and made it a thing that people could witness and watch?
I think his rectum went viral, his rectal biological age.
A man that is willing to share the metrics of his asshole with all of America is a man that I can get behind. Pause.
17 seconds later in the documentary.
Our minds, which we think are our primary tool of problem solving, is actually the source of our self-destructive behaviors. So I would argue the mind is dead.
Well, damn, Brian, as soon as I start to trust your ass, you gotta go all robot overlord on everybody. But if I'm being as charitable as I can be, I will admit he does kinda have a point. Like, think about how often you do things that you know are bad for you just because. I know for me personally, I'm way more productive if I have a very strict, rigid schedule. And it does sound kind of miserable to have like your entire day mapped out by the hour, but I tend to be happier in the long run because I've gotten so much more done. And if I just leave things like up to my brain and I don't have anything scheduled or written down, I'm fucking lazy, I'm not gonna lie. You guys see my posting schedule, you know what I'm talking about. And besides, I'm sure he's not being literal when he's talking about giving up your entire life to AI.
I walked into this because I was marching into an early grave. And now I've built an algorithm that takes better care of me than I can myself.
Okay, he is being literal, all right. Well, I think we would all agree that the idea of giving up your free will to an algorithm sounds batshit crazy. But in fairness to Brian, he does say that he's incredibly happy.
Removing my mind has been the best thing I've ever done in my life.
So question for everyone watching, if you were given a strict schedule that was hour to hour, but if you followed it, you were guaranteed happiness, would you do it? And I promise you, I don't have anything to sell, I'm just genuinely curious. Now, I'm sure most of you are wondering the same thing I was wondering at this time. What would cause a man to do all this bullshit? I mean, sure, tech millionaires are always on some weird shit, but why not spend your time trying to gain as much power and control as humanly possible like all of his colleagues do? Well, while Brian was building his first business, he wasn't living a very healthy lifestyle. He wasn't sleeping well, he wasn't eating well, he definitely was not on track to becoming a demigod.
I was building Braintree Venmo. I was just grinding myself into the grave. After a guaranteed fight with a partner, I would turn to unhealthy food as my soothing mechanism.
Pure sugar.
And of course, that just made things worse because my sleep would then suffer and it would just compound upon itself. I was miserable.
But then you learned that his dog shit lifestyle was actually not even his biggest problem, because Brian was also having a huge battle with his Mormon faith.
Sundays were my hardest days because I would go to church and everything about being there made me dissolve.
And look, I empathize with Brian. I remember what it was like when my mom forced me to go to church from sun up to fucking sundown, like she's trying to prove a point or some shit. I'm 10 years old. I only get 2 days off from this bullshit school I gotta go to, and now I gotta spend one of my 2 days off in this hot ass, loud ass building with this old dude yelling in this accent he's putting on for some reason, trying to teach me lessons I don't want to hear while he's simultaneously stealing from the congregation. And I just gotta sit there next to my mom trying my absolute best to not fall asleep or look pissed the fuck off. But anyway, back to Brian. He said that on Sundays after church, he would come home, lay down, and wouldn't move for hours because he was so depressed.
And the only thought that would soothe me was the idea of doing a deal with the devil and ceasing to exist. I didn't want an afterlife. I didn't want this life. I didn't want consciousness.
So from Brian's perspective, because his mind was the thing that was telling him to end his own life, he came to the realization that the mind is not a reliable source for decision making. So he left the Mormon church, got a divorce from his wife, moved to LA, and started this company Blueprint, where he gave up his free will to an algorithm. An algorithm that controls his diet, his exercise, and almost every single hour of his waking existence. Now, if the documentary ended here, it would almost be a sweet story. Self-made millionaire leaves the church and puts 100% of his effort into diet and exercise. That's a man America can get behind. Pause. But unfortunately, the documentary does not end there, because this man is just getting started. Because not only does he take diet and exercise to the extreme, but he also started taking pills that suppress his immune system, because he saw studies that show that these pills increase the lifespan of mice, and only mice. But I guess that's good enough for Brian.
Rapamycin was a drug that was first discovered in soil bacteria that were isolated on Easter Island. But what happened in 2009 was that a really rigorous study in mice found that it can extend lifespan.
Today is Rapamycin Day. So rapamycin is a drug that people use to suppress the immune system when they're getting an organ transplant.
I mean, what could go wrong? You know, who needs an immune system? Pussies, the weak, the poor. Speaking of weak bloodsuckers, doesn't it piss you off that these tech sociopaths are paying nothing in taxes while making billions of dollars selling your information to other lizard people, all so that they can sell you fake iPhone game ads? If you had the opportunity to protect yourself from this nonsense, wouldn't you take it? Well, thanks to the sponsor of today's video, ExpressVPN, you can now minimize your online presence by masking your IP address. For the normies watching, an IP address is like your home address, but for the internet. And just like your home address, you don't want a bunch of random shady people with that information.
Wow, that's amazing.
But how is this possible?
Well, ExpressVPN is an app that encrypts and reroutes 100% of your online activity through secure encrypted servers, making it way harder for anybody to track what you're doing online. That's exactly why I use it on all my devices, whether I'm at home or in public. These vampire weirdos have enough. You cannot have my data too. Please, for the love of all that is sacred and holy, leave me alone. Another benefit of ExpressVPN is that you gain access to region-locked content. Basically, having Netflix without ExpressVPN is like hiring a personal chef that can only make cheese pizza. What I'm trying to say is that all of these big streaming companies only give certain countries access to certain content, which is not fair to us, the common folk. These people have already tricked us with the idea of streaming, turning it into a less convenient cable 2.0. So why not get the most we can out of the services we're already paying for? For example, anytime I want to watch The Office again, since they took that from us, I just say I'm in Canada, and there it is. And the best part? How easy it is to use the ExpressVPN app. I literally press one button on my cell phone or computer, and that's all it takes to keep these soulless parasites out of my business. So if you don't like the idea of big tech tracking you and selling your data for profit, it's time to step up and get ExpressVPN right now. Get 4 extra months for free by scanning the QR code on screen, clicking the link in the description, or using my link at expressvpn/Kamal. Thank you again to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to
Moesha.
He also does gene therapy, which is so dangerous that it's only legal on some small island in Honduras.
One place that gene therapy is being offered is Roatan, Honduras. There is a free zone there called Prospera.
And to make things even more sketchy, this company was created by these two freaks and geeks looking motherfuckers.
Whatever information you need, we will do our best to provide. Any kind of diagnostic, anything. We will do our best.
That was the weakest "we'll do our best" I've ever heard in my life. Brian, you're clearly talking to a boy who does not believe in himself. And you're just gonna let this preteen inject you with mystery serums? If you start growing talons and shit, you only have one person to blame, my friend, okay? You're taking it too far. And call me an asshole, but I would never trust a 20-year-old white man who's wearing the glasses of a Native American grandmother. Did he get those by force or coercion? That's the first thing that goes to my head. But that's just me. See, gene therapy is thought to be something that's gonna help a lot of people down the line, but right now the science just isn't there yet. And one of the possible downsides is that this gene therapy might target genes that you actually don't want to get rid of, causing malignant cells, which would eventually cause cancer.
Many interventions do rejuvenate cells, but that incurs a risk that the cells then turn into different cells. Malignant cells, cancer cells.
Now, in fairness to these two, they say that their gene therapy is different because it actually doesn't interact with your genes, and there are also several different ways to reverse the therapy. But again, when the people who invented it look like this, and it's not regulated, and I have to go to some small island in Honduras, that's an easy fucking no for me. But that's the difference between people like me and people like Brian. I'm out here just trying to go to Planet Fitness 3 days a week. This guy's willing to risk it all to become a paler, scarier looking Captain America. And honestly, I respect that. I don't know if it's going to work in the long run, but I have to say, according to the documentary, Brian did increase his muscle mass by 7%. I don't know, but that sounds like a lot. But Brian's not done, because the weirdest therapy that caught most people's eye is the plasma therapy. Yes, this man is injecting the blood of the youth into his veins to prolong his life. From what I understand, everyone is consenting, but this is still weird as shit. There was a scene in the documentary where Brian's dad starts to feel like he's aging, and he goes to Brian to seek out his dark elf wisdom.
I got to the point where I would write a paragraph that didn't make sense. That scares me to death.
One day, my father called panicking. He said I would do anything to continue with my mental acuity.
And Brian, of course, suggests the blood ritual, where Brian would give his father some of his blood to help counteract his old. But Brian's not stupid. He wants to become immortal. I mean, sure, he doesn't want his father to get dementia or whatever, but he knows that he's not going to become a vampire by giving away his own blood like a loser. So he goes to his son Talmadge, which is a name none of us have ever heard, and suggests that Talmadge give Brian some of his blood.
And so I tell Talmadge, like, hey, like, Grandpa's pumped about this. So we started talking, and like we said, what if you did it too?
So now we have Talmadge giving his blood to Brian, and Brian giving his blood to his father. And I gotta give Brian his credit. He went all out and made this an entire event. They're taking family photos in multiple locations. They rented out a van. They call it the plasma bus, because of course they do.
The plasma bus got decorated!
It seemed like the documentary was really trying to make this a heartfelt moment, which is weird, but all of this is weird, so I'm just going with it. Because then you learn that Brian's father was not a great role model. He struggled with alcohol and the drugs, and basically failed Brian as a father.
It was like a 95% likelihood that he would fall through on anything. Like, pick me up from school, you know, help me with a homework assignment, like call me when he said he would, like, it would never happen.
At that time, I wasn't sure whether to find a girlfriend or have a line of coke.
And Grandpa saw this trip as an opportunity for reconciliation.
Having that kind of intimacy with both Brian and with Talmadge, for me, it was a chance to reconcile.
Now, if I was an asshole, I would ask how Grandpa is reconciling when he's the only one receiving blood and giving nothing, but they are bonding and everyone is hugging each other, so I would say this is uplifting in a dystopian nightmare kind of way. Shut up! Because since I've recorded this video and added it to my membership section, shout out to all my members, I appreciate you. I've discovered something even more fucked up and weird that Brian has done in the name of health and longevity. Because just a few days ago, Brian went viral on Twitter for comparing his and his son's nighttime erection data. Number of erection episodes, total duration of erection episodes, quality of nighttime erections. I have so many questions. The first one is obvious. Why are you recording and then posting your teenage son's boner data? That's objectively weird. Don't do that. Number two, how are you measuring this data? Are you and your son both wearing erection measuring underwear every single night? Do you have a bunch of cameras in the room? What are we doing here? And number three, I know you're the health and longevity guy and you measure and post everything about yourself, which is your choice as a grown man in his 40s. But don't we agree that it's a bit odd to be posting your son's erection data on the internet? Last time I checked, this tweet had over 31 million impressions. Does the world need to know that your son is getting 6 erections every night? Like, don't we think that's a little personal? Could you reach vampire status without sharing your son's boner data? I do think you do some positive things, Brian, but this is making me rethink every positive and or neutral thing I said and will say in this video. Now, the most interesting question to me while watching all this shit was, what are Brian's true intentions? Some people think it's just for the money and that this is all a grift.
It is my personal opinion that Brian Johnson is a grifter who, regardless of whether or not he actually believes he's going to live forever, is absolutely trying to make a quick buck off of people who are terrified of the idea of death and who have more money than common sense.
But this man is worth almost $500 million. He's not gonna go through all this bullshit just so that he could sell supplements and $11 peanut butter on his website. I think this is someone who grew up with the extremes of religion, realized it was never for him, and instead of trying to like pull it back or becoming some sort of a balanced human being, he decides to go even more extreme but choose health and longevity as his new religion. And I know I've been making a lot of jokes at Brian and his family's expense, and I will continue to do because all this shit is weird, but I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. Except for the boner data, that's too much. I don't know if I can get past that. I 100% believe we need extreme people like Brian to push society forward. I'm not saying he's doing it in a perfect way, but I respect the fact that he's committed. Now, the PhDs and other smart people argue that Brian's money would go a lot further if he would actually fund or help fund a proper trial.
He's taking hundreds of different interventions, and that means it's very, very hard to identify which, if any of them, are working. What you really need to do is a clinical trial where you get thousands of people, not just one, and you give them all the same intervention at the same dose.
Because everything Brian's doing is recorded, but because he's doing so many different things at once, it's almost impossible to tell what's actually working. Also, Brian's only one person, so just because a supplement or an experimental Honduran gene therapy works for him, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for anyone else, because bodies are different. So the best thing to do would be to test one thing on a shit ton of people. And look, I think the PhDs are 100% right here. If pushing humanity forward was Brian's sole goal, then I think he would help fund those trials instead of blocking people that ask him to.
Brian blocked me on Twitter because I suggested that he use some of his hundreds of millions of pounds to fund a clinical trial.
But just because his sole goal isn't to help as many people as efficiently as possible doesn't mean that what he's doing is solely negative. I mean, obviously he loves the attention. This guy clearly has an ego. He's not the most well-rounded individual of all time.
I wish I had Talmadge's legs.
He's kind of the perfect specimen.
But he did put in a lot of time and effort into building a community that's got people learning about health and longevity, and I would say that's a positive thing. He's got thousands of people going outside that are running with him on a regular basis, you know, like that's a good thing. And even me, from watching some of his videos and this insane documentary, I've even learned a few things about health and wellness that I will do going forward in my life. And let's be real, for a rich tech guy who doesn't seem to have a lot of friends or social awareness, he could be a lot worse.
But enough with the fun and games. It's time for everyone's favorite.
Work.
I am not a lizard.
I mean a lot worse. So shout out to Brian and all of his elven magic. I truly do wish him and his family the best. And if you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate you and I love you more than most people I'm related to. And if you want to see another video where I talk about an absolutely insane person, check this video out.